this very room, we had in a group that was pulled together by the California Endowment a lot of different community groups here talking about the impact of the local control funding formula. And there is a widespread belief out there that somehow we have hit the jackpot, that we've won the lottery, and that our financial problems are over. And certainly the local control funding formula does offer, if it's impacted, if it's implemented as it was approved, it certainly does offer a good future for West Contra Costa. The problem is that in the short run, we're still, in terms of our operating budget, we're still $29 million short. Despite the fact that we got $6.5 million more through the local control funding formula, we're still $29 million short of where we were in 2007-8. And we have just about the same number of students that we had in 2007 and 8. Now, the legislature is going to have to approve this, and the economy is going to have to keep growing in order for us to really reap the benefits of that. However, in the short run, we have multiple needs. We have a strategic plan that's going to come back before the board for approval that is going to really show, I think, the board and the community what's really wanted out there in terms of where our education delivery system needs to be. That is going to drive up our costs as well. You know, we also have hit this problem with our assessed value. After having a modest increase in 2012, Richmond had a decrease of almost 15% in the assessed value, and ours went down almost 6%, which really sets our bond program back. And so at the last meeting, the board asked that we bring in Brian Godbe, who's done a number of surveys for us, to at least frame out the landscape of where we might be and what are the possibilities for us to consider some kind of local revenue increase. And so tonight I'm really happy that Brian's here. He's done a number of surveys for us, and Brian Godbe from Godbe Research.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harder. Madam President, members of the board, I'm pleased to be here to discuss the possibility of another study with you for a new parcel tax. What I brought this evening, and I think you have hard copies as well, is a brief review of the data from our last survey, and I thought this would be a good jumping off point for further discussion tonight. As you'll recall from our survey methodology, we always have an informed and an uninformed test of support, and I have both of those charts here. In projecting June of 2014, we had about 57% support uninformed. Projecting November 14, it was about 56, so virtually the same statistically. When looking at the informed support, after we talked about all the positives and things that we would spend the money on, as well as negatives, we came back and we found that the June support was basically 60% in round numbers, and the November 14 support was 62%. A little bit lower than we'd like it to be. Now that was at a 5-cent per square foot tax. We also, in that survey, had a fallback at the end, which was a 3-cent per square foot test. And for June of 14, we had 70%, and for November of 14, we had 74%. So both of those are above the two-thirds requirement to pass a measure. June is a little tighter, but statistically speaking, there's no difference between the two. So that was a green light, I think, for something in this price range. Now, that was what we did in January. I think that was also conditioned on it wasn't very far from the election. We didn't know what Prop 30 meant to the district and didn't mean, and Dr. Harder has now explained the shortfall from where we were back when we did the first parcel tax renewal in 2008. In summary on this data, because I promised to keep this short, the survey said that there was really a narrow base of support at 5 cents, and narrow meaning not quite where we wanted it to be by the time we got to that informed test, but that again, when we looked at 3 cents, we were in pretty good shape. I think the economy's changed. Even since January. We're certainly seeing in our business and that costs are going up, so that means that people are feeling more confident, I think. So we might find a different rate in a new survey. and that I think that while we would have had an uphill battle in 2013, I think we stand a much better chance in 2014 of being successful. Excuse me. In terms of consideration for research, further research, the June 14 turnout is now expected to be lower than it probably has ever been in a gubernatorial primary. The thinking right now is there's no ballot measures on the state ballot. The governor is obviously running unopposed, or will run unopposed should he decide to run in the Democratic primary, and unusually there is no one of any major stature on the horizon in the Republican side. Now this district, as you know, is heavily Democratic, so there's not going to be a lot of Republican turnout anyway, but we need to keep that in mind, that it is going to be lower than a typical gubernatorial primary. Because you have these twin parcel tax and bond needs, we think that a split sample approach, as we've suggested, is probably the best way to do that. That works if we are going to look at either one or the other. If we're going to thinking about doing both, as we did in November of 2012, then we would probably put them in the same survey and maybe make the survey a little longer and reduce the sample size to something more like 600 instead of the 800 that a split sample needs. If we are doing the split sample because we want to do one or the other, parcel or bond, then we have 400 for each of those. It gives us an error rate of 3.5% in round numbers for the overall sample and 5% for each of the splits, which makes it fairly easy to compare the two of them. There are a couple constraints that we need to keep in mind at this stage, and those are Thanksgiving and Christmas. We don't want to be in the field the week of Thanksgiving. In fact, we don't want to be in the field from Friday night before Thanksgiving until the Monday after, because people leave Friday night for wherever they're going, to grandma's house, etc. So that's not a good week to interview. That means that we can interview in November from the 1st through the 21st. Thanksgiving's late this year. Between Christmas and Thanksgiving, the window is December 2nd through the 19th, and we certainly have done lots of interviewing during that time frame and will this year. I always put a caveat on it: the more time we can get before the Christmas shopping frenzy, the better, not just for interviewing purposes, but when people are spending money for Christmas, we don't want to ask them about spending money for a tax. If we're interested in moving quickly, then we need to move quickly. I think because we've done so many of these, we can probably get that done fairly expeditiously and get in the field and make that pre-Thanksgiving deadline. If we're going to wait until after the first of the year, and that may be appropriate too, then we can start interviewing really January 7th or after. Again, if you want to wait, and I'm not sure what the board's pleasure is at this point, but if you want to wait, I think giving yourself a little more time than racing right into the field when all of those January credit card bills are arriving is probably a good thing too. So that's what I have by way of summary and brief recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, as always.
Mr. Godbe, let's go to public comment first. How many do we have?
There are 4 people for public comment.
3 minutes.
So I will call your name, and if you wouldn't mind, please coming up to the reserved seats that we have in the front. Mr. Antonio Medrano, Dennis Cody, Carolyn Day Flowers, and Eduardo Martinez. Those are our 4 speakers: Mr. Medrano, Dennis Cody, Carolyn Day Flowers, and Eduardo Martinez.
Good evening, Dr. Harder and members of the board. It's strange being on the other side, but it's a good experience. With all the discussion and the trips to Sacramento and convincing the governor to sign all the legislation, and now that the local control funding formula has passed, I'm looking forward to reintroducing to those schools who don't have it, music, arts, class size reduction, and of course we need the teachers, decent salary, and also benefits. Those are key to keep our progress going. So strongly support that. There was another item I want to bring up that isn't relevant to the local control, but I just was at Richmond High this morning, and I'm bringing a speaker to talk about the Affordable Care Act, and I found out that there's a chasm of misunderstanding among the parents. We need to, at least our high schools and our middle schools, bring the information to the parents and be part of this world community. The schools are ours, and bring the information out to the parents. And I want to be part of that. So let's look at that. You should remember also that our governor didn't sign everything that we wanted. But for those of us in the civil rights field and human rights field, it's the greatest step forward in civil rights legislation, I think, in the history of California. The driver's license. If we stop you for driving, you don't have a license, we will not impound your car. The granting that exception to the high school students who are on the college campus who had to pay the out-of-state tuition, which was horrendous on some of our students. All of those work really well. We need to support those. And look at district elections. We have 5 cities, 5 board members. Think about it. Gracias. Thank you very much.
My name is Dennis Cody. I'm the parent of 2 children in elementary school in this district, and I've spoken before the board a couple of times before, and I have to say every time I have been extremely disappointed with the decisions that it's made. I hope it will be a little more responsible this time and think about what they're doing. Right now it looks like we have $776 million in bond debt. And according to information that was given, we will still owe over $353 million after 15 years, which means that we're going to be paying a lot more than that $776 million, with only a percentage of that going to the schools themselves. And I'm concerned if we try and do another bond that we're going to reduce our bond rating, which will increase our interest rate, which will mean that we will have even less leverage for the schools, because what I really want is the money to go to the schools, and therefore I am against bond measures. And for the schools, I mean for the teachers in the schools, for the children in the schools, for the teaching in the classroom. I think we have enough money in bonds right now for trying to rebuild the schools, but what we need is to help the learning of the students. Another thing to consider is that house values are rebounding, which means that the parents and the homeowners are going to have to pay more money as the values go up of their house. And sorry, I have to look at my notes because I have a lot to say. I'm sure I won't finish it. I'm very interested in local involvement in the schools, and I think we need to find a way of getting that involvement in the schools and seeing what we can do with the small amount of money that we have and seeing what our needs are. And I asked 2 years ago that we look at what our needs are, and the only presentation I saw is, do we think we can get money or not? I'm not interested in whether we can get money or not. I'm interested in what are we going to do with the money we have? How can we pay our teachers better? We're paying them worse than most other teachers. How can we make sure that we have substitute teachers to cover the classrooms? My daughter started with 38 kids in her classroom. They finally changed the class size, but then when the teacher was absent, they couldn't cover the classroom. That type of thing is what's upsetting me. It's upsetting me that there's no music or art programs. It's upsetting me that there are no electives in the middle schools. So, in short, I guess I'm against trying to go out to spend $50,000 to see if we're going to pass something when we're not even sure what we want to spend our money on. And I really think we need to focus on doing the best we can for our classrooms, for our students, and not seeing how we can get more money for bond measures. Thank you.
Carolyn Flowers.
Good evening, Dr. Harder, President Cronenberg, members of the board. Thank you for your service to our community. My name is Carolyn Day Flowers. I'm the parent of 4th grade twins at Kensington School. I've been an active volunteer in many prior efforts on the part of the district, including Measure G, Measure K, and others. I'm a strong supporter of the district. I'm enthusiastic about the direction in the strategic plan, so what I'm about to say is probably going to come as a bit of a surprise, which is that I urge you to be cautious about this endeavor to seek additional revenues through, especially through the bond and even through the parcel tax. The parcel tax, this initial study that was reviewed a few minutes ago was done in January 2013 when LCFF was maybe a glimmer in an eye, and it wasn't really even out there. And, you know, as much as I would, of course, vote for it, but from the standpoint of the credibility of the school district going out to the tax base and trying to seek another revenue measure, I think that the tax watchdog groups would be all over you, just in the so LCFF is supposed to deliver something like 60% more funding to this district by the time it's fully implemented. And I know that that's a big stretch by the time it's fully implemented. But even if it passes in the fall of 2014, the money won't roll in until the 2015-16 school year probably. And by then your funding is going to be higher from LCFF. I think you've got a really tough road ahead of you. As much as I would love to see it pass, I think it's going to be a really tough road to hoe. And even more so on the bond side, with all due respect, I can't think of anything else there is left to build. And with a long backlog of projects and bonds that have already been passed, I just think that it would be very difficult. Mind you, the threshold to pass it is easier in an even-numbered year, and no doubt that's part of your thinking behind looking into this. But I think it would be very difficult. And from talking to fellow parents in Kensington, I'm sensing very tepid support for this. In fact, you know, normally these kinds of meetings drum out dozens of parents from my school, and I'm the only one who came tonight. So please don't take this as my own self being not a supporter, but I just think you've got a really tough road ahead. So I'd urge you to be cautious and think about the credibility of this board. Think about the credibility of the school district when you go out and ask again. It hurts you. It hurts you for when you really need it. Not to say that you don't need it now, but it really hurts. So I would just urge you to be cautious, and thank you for your service. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Harder, Chair Ramsey, and the rest of the school board. We definitely need more money in the classrooms. We need more money, the kind of money provided by parcel taxes. But I question using $50,000 of the general funds to do a study. That's a teacher. That's a teacher that you're giving up to do a study. And considering that Chevron is instrumental in the 14.61% of the decline of assets, it seems logical that we would ask Chevron to pay for this study. It would be logical to ask Chevron to make up the money that we lost because of the property taxes lost. Now, I strongly am against bonds because bonds work counter to parcel taxes. The problem that we have with bonds is that when senior citizens senior citizens are able to ask for exemption for parcel taxes, but not for bonds. So when their property taxes go up and they're on fixed income, they're going to ask for refunds or they're going to ask for exemptions, and the only exemptions they're going to get is from the parcel taxes, which funds the classrooms. So every time we pass a bond, we're hurting the classrooms in more ways than making it more difficult to pass another parcel tax. So I highly recommend that we definitely go after Chevron to have them pay for the survey, and better than that, that we ask them to cover the funds that we so much need. What is it, $19 million deficit? You know, that would be a wonderful thing if Chevron would help education by actually funding that instead of doing community outreach, which is needed, but not as much as money in the classrooms. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board members. Mr. Ramsey.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to take some time with this discussion, and I'd like to bring up Dave Olson and Jeff Brott and Scott Henry, who are financial people, and I also have some comments. And also for Godbe, thank you for being here. You've been with me from the beginning. I've been on here 20 years, and fortunately for me, I respect and value the comments made by individuals and the voices heard. But I can tell you that I never forget Mr. Medrano was on the board with me when we sat last July 2nd over at Harding Elementary. And there was a packed house, hue and cry. Same statements that were being made then are being made now. That was after the loss of Measure K, where we were asking for an increase, and we got 65.5% on a very low turnout. I'm not concerned about turnout. I'm concerned about thresholds and themes, because I think numbers start running similar. 10,000 is the same as 20,000, same as 30,000. Once you hit a certain message and theme, the numbers don't deviate that much. So I'm not concerned about that. What I really want to share first with individuals is a couple of history lessons here. And I want to thank Peter Chow for being here today, because he was actually sitting as a student school board member when we lost a parcel tax back in 2004, our first effort since '92 doing a parcel tax. And I remember we lost, and when we weren't even as close as we were with Measure K. We got like 63%. We went back out 8 days later. We didn't have a poll. We didn't have information. And we actually went out for more. We went from 0.68 to 0.72 because athletics was a key indicator. So this isn't really about, putting your finger in testing. This is about leadership. This is about leadership, bottom line. And you have to define yourself by who you want to be. Does anybody know that Moraga Elementary, 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, for an elementary school district, they're asking for an extension of a parcel tax of $192. Nobody's over there complaining. Nobody's saying they shouldn't do it. They're doing it because they are exhibiting leadership, and they're saying this is what we want to provide and support. Later, you'll hear from our board president talk about the strategic plan and strategic priorities. Hopefully, you'll hear from board member Groves talk about that as well. But this district decided to do something after we were told, and I remember everybody on the board at that time said, okay, no bond, whatever. So they went out and listened, and guess what? All the people said they were going to step up and participate, they didn't do it. They didn't step up at all. So when we came back, Mrs. Merriweather, Board Member Merriweather, Board Member Cronenberg, myself, Board Member Thurman, Board Member, we said we were going to do what we felt is healthy for the district. We put a parcel tax renewal on.
That's not the truth. I'm tired of it.
Why is this allowed? I mean, this person's not, I was respectful to the person. This is why I asked Mr. Greer that we have some order. I asked every meeting to make sure that we had people here so we didn't have this kind of behavior. It's unacceptable to be disrespectful like that. So first I'd like to know, can I at least, President Cronenberg, at least speak and remind the audience they have to be courteous?
Yes, he has to be able to speak. Mr. Ramsey, go ahead and speak. There's no interruptions.
Thank you. So the reality is that a lot of people question what we were doing at that time. But guess what? 75% of the voters, 75% of voters voted for that parcel tax measure. We would have been dumb not to have done it, wouldn't we? Our kids would be missing out on $10 million, athletics, some level of music, some support. We'd have been dumb. We passed a bond measure that was for $360 million. That enables us to continue to do much-needed work and talk about the innovation that you want to have. And Ms. Phillips working, you're going to visit technology now. Guess what? If we hadn't done it, you wouldn't be talking about it. You're talking about helping kids. So I always tell people, what do you have to lose? Who cares? Even if you lose, so what? We've passed 6 bond measures and 3 parcel taxes. And guess what? We've lost the bond measure and we've lost 4 parcel taxes. So this is something that I think, in my mind, doesn't speak to anything other than being respectful of your constituents in your community and allowing them to decide. Don't let a couple of people, if they, like Ms. Kronberg says, if you want somebody to oppose, they can file a ballot opposition and say it's not important. It's free. You can file a ballot opposition for free. So if people feel that strongly and they want to notify voters, they're able to do it. But I did have a series of questions, but I want to remind board members, in Meade, the cycle is about initiation, starting a process, then looking at it from the standpoint, what's the growth potential and growth opportunities? Because remember, we still have to deal with liability costs that are going to go on for the foreseeable future. That's things that we have no control over but are long-term obligations. Because I can tell you, if we didn't have some of these long-term obligations and paying $20 million annually, obviously we'd have a different conversation. But why are we going to sit around and sit idly by and not address and say to our constituents community, we have to let you know why it's important to do this, why it's necessary? Because I can tell you there's neighboring districts that aren't paying on these long-term obligations. We just got out of paying the state and paying those interest costs. So now we have an opportunity to continue to let our kids, and hey, my kids did well even with these restraints. But we know that I was able as a parent to provide additional support that a lot of our kids here in Richmond and San Pablo can't do it. Shame on us if we don't see the need to step up and make those accountability issues. And I had a question, Brian, a couple of questions for you. So, you know, for me, you taught me a long time ago, really, it's looking at really what's the temperature and tolerance. So for me, I want to look at sort of the key things, but I want to measure at 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents, because I feel in some level what gets you to the plus or minus based on that information, better than saying, hey, this is what I want. I'd rather look at it and say, this is what voters are willing to fund. What are your thoughts on that?
I certainly think we can look at a tax threshold. I think that's completely relevant in a parcel tax. It's a little more dicey for a bond measure, but to the extent that we're talking about the parcel tax, it is very easy to do that, and I think that it's warranted because the economic climate is changing. It may not be quite as strong as we'd like it to be, but it is better than it was last fall, and I think it's better than it was in January.
And Sherry, what did we have left in the set-aside account, this rainy day fund that we still have? I don't know, was it $10 million or what was it? $10 million. We're talking $50,000, you guys, and we got $10 million sitting there. This is one thing I'm going to be adamant about. School districts are not saving accounts. School districts are not saving accounts. School districts are supposed to spend resources on kids. And we're now trying to educate ourselves and find out a way to go. We're talking $10 million is sitting in a bank account. $10 million. We're talking about a $50,000 investment to know what we need to do. Because we did it when after July 2nd. Because I went out, you know, people can be critical. They funded just a parcel tax only. I went out and raised the money for a parcel tax and a bond measure. So I don't want to hear about what I remember what I had to do, because I knew instinctively that it was a huge mistake that board had made back then. Huge mistake, because they did it for political reasons. This is about the kids tonight. This is not about politics. So I made the sacrifice to go out and raise the money to be able to do it for the children, because I wanted to make sure that that information was relevant. And guess what? We exceeded what those poll numbers. You remember that, Brian? We exceeded the numbers.
Yeah, certainly did.
We exceeded the numbers with that. So don't be afraid of the reality. This district has done 14 different measures. You want to talk about a district that's knowledgeable, informed, and has the wherewithal and ability to do things. This district does. The other thing that I want to say for me to you is I strongly believe that the state of California is really speaking to districts about local control and local funding. And that doesn't mean through the state mechanism that could change. Even this local control funding formula, it could change. You get a new governor, they could say, you know, we don't really have the money now, even though it's there, we can change our mind. And so what I'm really saying to my board is that if you look at every high-performing district, Albany, you look at the Moragas, you look at the Arendas, you look at the Palo Altos, you look at the Piedmonts. Piedmont has a $2,000 a year parcel tax. They get 88%, and nobody comes and complains about it. There's an investment there. And so, Brian, for me, I'm interested in the bond and parcel tax, the 600 number, in test, because I don't want to split, because we've shown we can do it this way. And so, since we've shown we can do it this way and going down this path, I don't have any problem doing it again. I don't have a problem doing it again because the voters are familiar with it now. They have some history doing it, and they've been able to see it, and they voted and approved it. As people say, they're sophisticated and smart enough to understand it, and they're there to address it. So I did want to make sure that some of the themes, I think teacher salaries are a big issue. We have to pay teachers. I want to be able to, at least for me, as a question, I want you to be able to sit down with Diane Brown and UTR and make sure they have their fingerprints on both measures. I think if we don't get buy-in from all of our staffs, Local 1, from UTR, from SSA, and from the principals, it doesn't matter. So I think that we need to have all four of those unions at least talked to and at least consulted as to what actually should go into. Because, Ms. Cronenberg, we'd like to look at a maintenance as part of a parcel tax. Berkeley Unified has it, and to be able to maintain a lot of these facilities. We have it somewhat with MRAD, but I'd like to look at it with that. Yeah, we hear tepid maybe support. Okay, fine. But, you know, I'm going to be speaking to 30, 40,000 voters, so I'm not going to be dictated by 4 or 5 people and say, we hear music, whole child means different things in different places, but music and class size reduction is pretty important for Kensington. And how dare somebody say, well, I don't want to continue the building program when I just spent $65 million at Portland Middle School. How tragic to tell Crespi and to tell other schools that it's okay for me to put a ton of money into El Cerrito and forget about them. I still have work I want to do at the El Cerrito playfields. I still have Madera Elementary that has things that I like to see happen. It would be tragic to me to say that I'm willing just to do all this wonderful things and leave a dozen schools behind. Elaine Brady's here from Shannon. They're committed. We want to see Shannon just like we would see Pinole Valley High. We want to see what's going on. We want to see Grant. We want to see Link. It's not something I just want to see for Coronado, for King, for Gompers. I want to see it for the entire district. We just did DeAnza. Why not Kennedy? I was in Kennedy High at 4 o'clock today. That place needs to be torn down in the front. I finally admitted to myself. That front building needs to be demolished, bottom line. And I love the mock trial program and the team, but why not give them the bold, innovative approaches to maybe bringing learning in and talk to a Supreme Court justice while they're going through their mock trial programs? Why not have the interactive work so that we could see it? Why not really give them what we're going to be giving to other parts of the district? And why not make that happen? And so I just really want to say that I'm going to be driven by the voters in West Contra Costa, and I'm going to be driven by their message and by their content. Parents come and go. Love parents. I'm a parent, still a parent. But the reality is we did that last bond and parcel tax with 5 people running that campaign. 5 people ran that campaign. Not a groundswell of constituents and community people. And you know what? There was ballot oppositions on both. There was a ballot opposition on the parcel tax, and there was a ballot opposition on the bond. And guess what? The voters were able to do it. So I want to talk before, Brian, take a seat because I have some questions of my finance people around the bond measure. I think the parcel tax is pretty straightforward. We've done it pretty much. Mr. Olson, you're here representing, are you with what firm?
My name is Dave Olson. I'm with K&N Public Finance. We're the financial advisors on the district's bond program.
Now, I've talked to you over the past few days and really gone through some of the things. I believe this is cutting edge to be able to look at things around tax-based stabilization, keeping within tax rates. Are there other districts that have this kind of flexibility that we're talking about with us, and what potentially options do you see working with the continuity and being able to work with this, finishing up these schools that we have at Wilson and Grant and Kennedy and some of these other schools?
I guess I would answer that by saying that this is a district with a very large bond program, very ambitious bond program in place for 15 years. We're going for probably be going for another 10 years under the current plan. It's addressing a lot of facility needs over a long period of time. This district, because of that, this district has special needs regarding flexibility, and I think has been creative in creating flexibility. I'd also say that that's ended up being important for this district because of some of the uncertainties regarding tax-based growth, regarding costs of the project over a long period of time. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
Kind
and
of
I want to bring up
unique
Jeff.
Situation here that requires flexibility, and that that's been proven over time.
I'd like to bring Jeff and Scott up because I had a question about, as I've learned over the last 5 years, especially after the 09 moment, is about this decline in AV and how to address it and the impacts that it can have in shutting your program down if they further decline, just for the viewing audience. And say your name for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ramsey, Madam Cronenberg, Jeff Barata, Piper Jaffrey, Superintendent Harder, and the rest of the board. I think what we have seen throughout the state, and I'll certainly let my colleague Scott talk as well, is the decline in assessed values have constrained programs. And they've constrained programs to the point of actually stopping districts in the midst of their authorization and not allowing them to access 100% of the authorization that the voters approved. The real flexibility comes when you have multiple authorizations, so you can pick and choose from each authorization and how you can balance each of those tax rates. This district has been enjoying a flexibility that other districts in the state have not seen, and they certainly, to the magnitude that this district is seeing that flexibility, other districts clearly haven't seen. So having that flexibility is paramount to maintaining your program. As Mr. Olson said, it is a robust program. It's got a lot of needs, and having the ability to turn one faucet on and turn the other one off and move around as the AVs start to change gives folks like us the flexibility to be able to structure things in a way to keep that program moving.
Great. Scott Henry with De La Rosa. I would wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Barata. Having right now we're accessing two separate bond elections. Having a third would, of course, just give the district additional flexibility. Right now we're counting on 4% assessed valuation growth looking forward, and of course being able to slow those programs because of an additional bond election would give you flexibility if, in fact, that assessed valuation growth, like the Chevron issue, came in beneath that 4%. So whether or not we would need the extra flexibility, we have no way to know, but it does give the district and its financing team the ability to make sure that we can accelerate or at least continue the program at your direction.
Dave, can I, Mr. Olson, thank you very much, you guys, because that's key to me to learn about it. I mean, we had a decline of 6%. And we in this district know that could really hamstring it, because tell them Measure J passed in 2010, you got $77 million you can issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When do you think you can issue?
It was approved in 2005 for $400 million. We issued $322 million. There are $77 million remaining to be issued. Under our current plan, those bonds will be issued in 2023. It's uncertain that we'd be able to do that at that time.
And that's what the voter really needs to understand. It's not like, because one thing I want to teach CSBA is this district has figured out the Prop 39 schemes. We figured it out. And I'm realizing even more and more that it's really not about the size, it's about the number. It's about the flexibility. It's about the options. We've been able to access money through seismic programs. We've been able to exercise money through charter school programs. We've been able to capture more eligibility money than anybody. We're even looking at doing things for Gompers and going back to Pinole because other districts can't access those resources because we don't have the tax base. Because for whatever reason, West County is seen as a place that doesn't merit it, and I'm really disappointed time and time again to see assessments not reflected where they should be. But what I'm trying to find out from you is having, because most people don't know, this district actually, and that's what frustrates me, is people don't understand the history. Do you know we did 4 bond elections in 5 years? We did a bond election in 98, 2000, 2002, and 2003. So for somebody to sit up here and tell me this district hasn't done this is nonsense. They did 4 bond measures in 5 years and didn't even have close to the tax base it has now. And they did it under Prop 13 at 2/3. So the reality is we did a special election on September 16, 2003 and got 59%. We were trying for 2/3 and got, there was, you want to talk about a low turnout, you're not going to get as low as turnout as you got on a one-day special election of like 23%. We tried a sales tax with the city of Richmond in 2011. So I'm not worried about when it is. I just want to know thresholds, Brian. So that's more of my key, because this district has a history, and this board needs to make a statement about where it stands and why it's willing not to be afraid to continue to do what every board's done for the last 15 years, which is advocate for kids and get out and talk to the voters. The bottom line is that we're going to need that flexibility all the way around, because if you don't have it, it doesn't matter. Because if you don't get growth, those existing bonds, you're going to still have to pay for them. Is that correct? I mean, you're going to have to pay regardless. They've already been issued. So the better you manage it, tax rate stabilization money to keep the cost down, looking at flexibility and growth, this is more beneficial to the voter than staying stagnant and not doing anything. And so my final question to you, what are the districts have you seen being able to exhibit this kind of forward thinking? Do you think we're on the cutting edge of trying to demonstrate what should be happening out here in the state of California?
I would say that this district is unique in terms of the ambitions of its program to deliver first-class facilities to all of its students with a tax base that is smaller on a per-student basis than many of your similarly sized, than most, or if not all of your similarly sized neighbors. So I think you are approaching the bond issuance process in a way that's unique, and I think cutting edge would be a fair way to describe it.
And so the final thing is, we would need another debt limit waiver for this as well, as part of this conversation.
You would need to. The amount of debt that you have outstanding now is approximately 4% of your assessed value, I think a little bit below that. The statutory requirement is that you can't issue, the statutory rule is that you can't issue new debt. If in issuing that debt it causes the total amount of debt to exceed 2.5%. So if this bond authorization was approved and you wanted to issue bonds from it, during the next probably 8, 10, 12 years, you would need a bonding capacity waiver in order to do so.
And we did that last time. It was unanimously approved by the State Board of Education, 9-0?
Yes, it was.
All right. I'd like to ask one final question of Jeff and Scott. We heard a question about ratings I want to make sure people are informed and they understand over the last 4 or 5 years, what have you seen in terms of our bond ratings with our 3, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, so that the viewing audience knows that comments made were erroneous. So I'd like to be able to have that put on the record tonight.
Absolutely. Again, Jeff Barata, Piper Jaffray. Your ratings are currently AA3 Moody's, A+ S&P, Standard & Poor's, A+ Fitch.
With positive.
All with stable and positive outlooks. That has been an improvement over the years for you. You've done nothing but move forward and into a positive direction, and all of the rating agencies are currently looking, which portends their outlook of positive or stable, looking in a very positive direction for you.
And the need to purchase bond insurance has been reduced as well. I mean, what are you seeing with that in terms of our credit, the interest in the investor world? What are you seeing?
That's absolutely a correct statement. I will hesitate a bit because we do have an item in a couple of weeks at the next board meeting to discuss it fully.
Right.
So that is a positive statement. It's in a positive look.
All right, so Scott, did you have any follow-up on that as in terms of our ratings and where we're going?
No, I think Mr. Barata said it, that the district has continually over the last several years been upgraded. You're positive, you're stable. There's no reason to believe that additional issuance of additional bonds will reduce your rating.
Right, and I appreciate that. And already the rating agents already know we have, and I don't like the word high, because this community can't get its assessment valuation fairly appraised, and I'm going to use that fairly appraised by the county assessor's office, because I don't think it's fairly appraised, and we're going to find that out, that they say we have high debt levels. Well, high relative to what? I always say it's just only because we're seen as a community that should be considered to be low income, to be poor. Well, you can define yourself any way you want to, and you guys can have a seat. You can define yourself any way you want to. But the reality is, I'm never going to define this as a poor community. I'm going to define this as a community that's trying to make sure that it does its very best to help its kids and to give everything they can. And they're going to sacrifice for the betterment of their children, just like the immigrant population did, just like those coming out of slavery did. They made it better for the next generation. And I can tell you that if you take care of the needs now and you try to do things for kids at Stige, if you try to do things for kids at Kensington, if you try to do things for kids throughout the district, what a tragedy to then say in 2 years you can't do the innovation you want with technology because you can't issue any more money. Why not give yourselves a flag and you'll kick yourself, why didn't I do it? Because one thing I can say about this district, it never had to kick itself and say why they didn't do something. They always went ahead, and guess what? Each and every time, people were surprised. And each and every time, it kept the district afloat and moving ahead. Because the same group of people came a year and a half ago. It came 2 years before that. And they said, don't do it. Don't do it. And I value their comments. I'm glad that they're sharing their opinion. But I also know that I trust in the voters in West Contra Costa, and I trust in the polling data. And I'm with Ms. Cronenberg. I'm going to trust, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to encourage my board to look at that window from November 1st to November 21st, to at least be informed. Inform yourself. You got a $10 million surplus, and you're talking about $50,000? We're talking about educate yourself to know exactly what opportunities you have, especially you spend all this time, you spend more time working on this strategic plan than you'll ever have to work on a campaign. But what a tragedy to have a strategic plan that you couldn't implement. That, to me, would be the biggest insult to the kids in this district, that we didn't have the courage to say, we're going to find a way to fund it. We're not just going to write it, we're going to implement it. But I'll conclude my remarks because I'm supporting this initiative tonight, and I'm looking at the 600 to do both for June 2014. That's where I'm at, but I want to hear the rest of the board.
You did? Okay, Mr. Enos.
It's difficult to follow that in that so there was an awful lot of, I think, hard data in this. One of the things that I am struck with, and I hearken back to my dad, who was a teacher for a long time in this community, whenever you get a chance to help education with funding, you always take it. It doesn't always happen, and has been history. We're talking about doing a survey. It's going to cost us some money to do a survey. One of the things I taught my government classes many, many times is you don't go ahead and take action without some kind of plan. And you're going to have to take a look at the data. And we know that there's a lot of ifs in what the state is doing, okay? And in all honesty, that's the one that strikes with me. We have been very self-sufficient in this district, as we always have been, okay? And everybody shows up, everybody works hard, and we have an awful lot of great kids graduate from our school district into great lives. The biggest thing that we're working with, and I do have to agree with Charles on this, if you don't ask, you don't get anything. Okay, it's important to put it in front of the voters. If the voters don't believe it's the time to do something, they'll let you know with their vote, and they have. I have a lot of faith in that, but I think at this point, I need to see more data, particularly as it affects the strategic plan that isn't yet finished. And that's something that's going to make a big difference. And the belief that we're going to be on, the economy itself is going to be on an ever-trending upward motion, we know is not true, okay? And that's part of what we're doing. We've got students that need to be in new schools. I don't know that I'm happy with the bond, but I demand we pass the parcel tax, because if we don't get the good young teachers we need in this district, if we don't go and compete for those people and we don't put the resources into that, the losers are the kids. And that's something that I can't really stand up with. So at this point, as everybody considers this, bear in mind we're not allocating $5 million to build another building. We're allocating $50,000 to get an accurate picture of what should work for the community and give the community a chance to look at it with us. So at this point, that's kind of my thinking given what I've heard.
Thank you, Mr. Enos. Ms. Merriweather? Yeah.
Okay, so first I want to start off with I'm not sure what the rush is. We have a lot on our plate right now as a district. We're getting ready to implement the Common Core next year. We're also in the middle of our strategic plan trying to figure out what it is that we're going to do for our children. And so I'm not sure what the rush is, and I feel very uncomfortable about rushing into something. I feel that we need to take time and look at where we are with our strategic plan, what's in there. And most strategic plans that I know, you build it within the money that you already have. And so I've been a part of a strategic plan process, and I know that it's based on the money that you already have in your district. So it's not going to affect that. And I also feel that the LCFF, the local control funding, there's no uncertainty in that. It's an 8-year plan to have money coming into this district, and it comes in 3 phases. And so we're very clear about that money will be coming into the district. And so I think we should postpone this survey for at least a year so that we as a board can look at where we are. And the strategic plan should be guiding us. And so I think that for us to just rush in and do a survey and then decide we're going to do this is not a good decision. And so, you know, that's my feelings about this.
Thank
you. Dave, can you get up here and talk for a second? Thanks. So what are the assumptions that were built into the bond program so that we could keep growing and keep our schools built on schedule under the current measures?
The current program
calls for bonds to be issued in alternate years in amounts of $125 million each through 2023. I think the final issue in 2023 will be a little bit smaller because that will just take up the remainder of the bonds. So that will include the 2000 Measure or 2010 Measure D and 2012 Measure M, as well as the remaining bonds under 2005 Measure J.
And under those assumptions, what were we projecting as the maximum tax rate per $100,000 of AV?
The tax rates would apply to each of the programs. The 98 Measure E tax rate is now about $10, and that's going to fall off. The 2000 Measure M, I'm trying to remember. Each of the tax rates are separate. The 2000 Measure bonds will be falling off a little bit, but when we get into the 2002, 2005, 2010, 2012, they'll all be at the max, and those maximums are approximately $60 for 2002, $60 for 2005, $48 for 2010, and $48 for 2012.
And when we reach a point when we're paying the taxpayers are paying maximally to return to pay off the bonds, what is what's the highest amount that we'll be paying?
The highest amount that we've had to date has been this year, and it's approximately $285 per 100,000. It would not get much higher than that, and starting in 2016, it would fall because some of the Measure 2000 bonds would be paying down.
And how would a new bond affect that?
The new bond would add on top of that. These bonds, because of how they've been structured with an escalation in the repayment, that the tax rates at about 4%, the tax rates remain the same unless we get growth beyond 4%. So each of the new taxes accumulates on top of the old.
So what are the implications for our our facilities program if we don't issue a new bond right now?
If you don't have a new authorization, that the new bond, that the expenditures on the new bond would need to fit within that financing plan, which is approximately $60 million in expenditures per year.
So a significant reduction in what we can do.
Well, we've been running as high as $100 million, maybe even higher at certain points, but I think the expenditure plan now has been built to fit the $60 million annual expenditures.
So we can keep a pace with our commitment to rebuild our schools.
With the current plan, yeah.
With the current plan.
There's not going to be opportunity, that's subject to disruption if we get news that unexpected bad news. And it also is, is limited a little bit more than what your maximum annual expenditures have been.
So what are the upsides of having a new bond altogether?
To the extent that the expenditure program is slowed because of constraints on the financing side, that a new bond measure would, depending on how it's structured and all those things, would ease some of the constraints on the financing side. To the extent the program at some point in the future has some unexpectedly bad news on tax-based growth, the new bond would help you be flexible in that case. And if there's a point in the future where the total amount of money is too little, and voters would have voted for a new bond now and not in the future, that flexibility would be another benefit. So those three, I think, are as I think through it now, and again, have just been thinking about this potentiality over the last few days, but those are the three clear benefits I can think of.
And what are the risks of issuing a new bond?
I would say that the major risk from my point of view, and again, just a couple days of thought here, is this district has been working hard to have a transparent program that builds public trust. To the extent that there is any feeling in the community because of putting this bond measure on the ballot or in reaction to this bond measure being put on the ballot, that there are potential negative stories that create some conflict, that would be a concern. We don't know that's going to happen, and that's one of the reasons why it's I'm glad to see that the first step is a voter opinion survey. You've put the public first. Continuing to do that, I think, is important.
Right, ask the voters.
Okay, that's a good question. Thanks. That would help answer my question.
Okay.
And,
thank you.
So, Jeff, you're not seeing any possible implications for our current bond ratings?
As Scott had said, I agree with him as well. I don't believe that having another authorization puts your ratings at risk. At this point, you are at a very stable footing. Financially, you're moving in the right direction. We've seen your ratings go in the right direction. What you're just doing is, well, with this action tonight, you're just researching the information. But if you were to go all the way down the path and ultimately get it authorized, you've just given yourself more flexibility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I want to point out something. Well, I want to respond to it, in that the thing that wasn't said that I just hit, and I just want to make sure it's on the record, is we were able to use funds for deferred maintenance and to be able to do things like capital projects that help the general fund through the bond program. So a lot of things that would not have happened because of deferred maintenance that we were able to put $2.5 million in every year. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted as well.
Ms. Merriweather? Yes.
One question.
Yes.
Ms. Gamby, you probably could answer this. How much money is in the bond account right now? Do you know that?
Well, we just issued $125 million, which we're going to be closing at the end of this month, and there was about $77 million as of August and September. So I don't have the precise number, but it's approximately that in terms of cash. And then what's still available left to issue, I would ask Mr. Olson to address that, what we have left to issue. Dave?
So we have $77 million in the account now, and then the $125 million will be coming?
In cash.
Okay.
And after that money is in the bank, there's another $515 to be issued under the 2010 and 12 measures, which have pretty good flexibility on access, moderately good flexibility in terms of access, and then another $77 million under Measure J, which I would characterize as having restricted access at this point.
So you said $515 million?
$515 million, so $592 million total, not all of which is easily accessible within the next few years.
Mr. Gross.
I have the floor back. Thanks. Dr. Harder, under my understanding, we did plan the strategic plan on the assumption of significantly higher funding. Most of the elements in the strategic plan are not in our current operating budget, and we'd have to add more. Is that not true?
There are certainly some elements that are coming forward in the strategic plan that are going to add significant expenses to the district. When you start thinking about preschool, when you start thinking about full-day kindergarten, when you start thinking about really enhancing our counseling programs, those are some of the bigger ticket items in there.
And do we have even rough estimates right now of what that might look like over the next few years?
We do. We've done a preliminary sort of back of the matchbook estimates on that right now, and it looks like the operating revenues that we need to implement the strategic plan on an annual basis would be close to $40 million a year.
$40 million a year, and we're talking with a 3-cent. Well, we don't know what we're getting yet, but we're talking probably $10 million from a new parcel tax.
It would be substantially less than that. Each cent generates about $1.3 million, so 3 cents would be a little under $4 million annually.
So it'd have to be a very targeted element of whatever we're looking at. Okay.
There'll be lots of hard decisions to make, yes.
Lots of hard decisions to make. And Brian, would you come to thank you. I had the pleasure of seeing the new superintendent in Cupertino the other day, and she was coming there from Oakland, and she was asked what the difference between her district Cupertino and her former district, Oakland, was in a child experience. And she said in Cupertino, they prioritize enrichment. And the parents, the community, will fund heavily. They will not sacrifice enrichment in terms of their children's education. They see it as a vital part. And communities like Oakland or West Contra Costa, those are usually the first programs to go. And so if we're pulling, I would really like to know whether this community wants to fund schools that look like Cupertino, and whether we want to prioritize a rich curriculum of arts and music and science experiments and experiential learning. I'm sure you can find better phrasing for it, but if that's the significant difference between a high wealth and a low wealth district, I think it's something we want to consider offering to our children. So if we can pull some phrasing along that line, I'd really appreciate it.
We certainly can. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, you done? All right, so let me weigh in. I have looked at the strategic plan very carefully. And as Dr. Harder said, even with what is in here, and there are some things that are conspicuously absent from here that are, I think, very important, it is not something we can do within the budget we have now, and it's not something we can remotely implement until we get much closer to that grand finale of the rollout of the local control funding formula. And the two things that strike me right off the bat that are not in here, there isn't a commitment to smaller class sizes in secondary. That's not here at all. And there isn't really a commitment to the other thing that is important to all of us, and that is salaries, right? How we would approach improving salaries. That's not here. It's maybe implicit, but it's not here. So what we have in the strategic plan are 14 brand spanking new district initiatives that we don't do at all. When I went through it, I found 14 things that we absolutely do not do. And another 15 that are ongoing that they're asking us to expand. And all of these things come from the people who came, our 2,000 people who came to meet with us and tell us that this is what was important to them that we fund. And also there were a number of things that are just initiatives of how our teachers need to change their teaching practice, which is expensive in itself, and that there needs to be training to support them to do that, which I think is a major, major priority. And that it needs all the support we can possibly give it. So, given that, when I look at the fact that, as Mr. Ramsey said, we were put here to lead, what I have in front of me is a list from our community as to what they want. And what I don't have is the ability to fund it. I simply don't have that ability. So I think it's a fair thing to ask the community if they want to pay for it, and what it is that they do want to pay for. I think that we've asked them before, and I, as Mr. Ramsey said, I listened very carefully. I've learned, Mr. Godbe, not to push them. This is not the time to evangelize. This is the time to harvest. And I just want to know what's out there for me to harvest, because that's been our success. The thing about us, as Mr. Ramsey explained, is we are the anomaly of the low-wealth district. We're the low-wealth district that didn't so disrespect their community that they were afraid to ask. And that's what I think. I think not asking is being disrespectful. I think not asking is having the arrogance of saying, oh, they're not even worth asking because they'll never say yes. This community did say yes. It said yes a number of times. And I think that because we went and we had the conversation around the strategic plan, I want to find out what they want to say yes to in terms of funding it. That's really my priority right now, and that's why it was important to me to put this conversation in. I think it would be foolish to just say, okay, well, I have this list of things you want, but I know I can't afford them, so we'll just put that over here and not pay any attention to it. If I respect the fact that we went through the trouble of asking, I think we need to find out how much we can possibly fund. So that's where I am. If anybody has anything else to say, if not, I'm going to look for a motion.
I mean, for me, the reality is that I've been on this board for 20 years. I've been through all this stuff. I've seen it all. And the reality is this district has to come up with creative ways to get, and she didn't speak about the bond measure at all, that's her decision, but there has to be, you're not going to be able to run a campaign for a parcel tax in this community and think, and I'm going to tell all of you, and think that you can just do it alone. Go for it. I'm the one that's going to be out here having to raise the money and do it all. I know what people are willing to do and hitch something to a wagon. The parcel tax is able to hitch to the wagon. So people can sit up here and talk all they want, and I'm very clear about it now, because it passed with both. You can't do it alone. So you can sit up here and talk about what you want to do, but I dare anybody to get out here and put it out and try to get it done. You're not going to be able to do it. You won't raise a dime. And there won't be a single consultant who will sit here and tell you, I'm doing it for the kids. I know, because I saw how much money they wanted each time they said, where's the $70,000? Where's the $100,000? Where is it? So we can sit around here and engage in a conversation that's not real. The reality is we have to understand what enables us to do other things for all of our kids. If you guys don't do it, then you're not a smart board. I've been around here too long. I don't need to do it. I don't need to do it. I've done it. I'm doing it because of the fact that Ms. Cronenberg's right. A lot of things in the strategic plan can't happen unless you have, because I hate to tell you, I've been around, there's been other quote-unquote local control funding processes. No wealthy district is going to allow you to compete. They're not going to allow it to happen. You think they're going to let you take their money to compete against them? You're wrong. That's naive. It's not going to happen. The only thing that's going to happen is if you continue to go to the local voters and you continue to ask them what happens. Ms. Cronenberg went to a session with Larry Tramattola and a group of people, and they go, well, how do you do it, blah, blah, blah. She had to be honest with them. It's not done any other low-wealth district to renew a parcel tax and have it done 3 times along with an MRAD. Let's get serious around here. The bottom line is you have to have strategies to be able to, a rising tide lifts all boats. There's nothing wrong with improving your schools, facility-wise. Just bottom line, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good value just to have it, to have a safe field at El Cerrito High School, to have functioning classrooms, to come up with new technology innovation. There's nothing wrong with that. And you don't have to make excuses about saying it is. There's just nothing wrong with it. And so I just want to be clear that my motion is going to be to the 600 voter approval for both measures, to look at it for June or November and to be able to do it and say that's what we're going to do. We've done it before. Voters were very comfortable with it. They had no problem with it. And guess what? Something that wasn't said. 99% of the people who are property owners paid their taxes on time. 99%. So if 99% in this community pays their taxes on time, not default, that's pretty clear to me that they're okay and they're able to handle and support it. 99%. Read your POS. It will show you it is actually improved from 5 years ago when over 6.5% didn't pay on time. We're talking 1.4%. Don't pay their property taxes on time. So for me, it's a clear question. And another thing that hasn't talked about is over $150 million has come into this community without it going against its tax rolls. You wouldn't have had it unless you had a flexible, diverse program. So that's my motion, and I hope I get a second, and then we get a roll call to it. Randy?
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, and let's do a roll call vote.
Mr. Enos.
Aye.
Mr. Groves?
Yes.
Ms. Merriweather?
No.
Mr. Ramsey?
Aye.
President Cronenberg?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Godbe, you're hired.
And Dr. Harder, while we're looking at this, and this is for the board, I'd like to look at, like Mr. Reno said, for the November 1st to the November 21st period.
Yes.
I mean, like we said, we want to avoid all the holiday rush, so
Right.
getting out in the field, I think it'll be useful for us.
Right. Thank
What's
you.
our first meeting in December, Dr. Harder?
December 11th.
Can we have him come, could you come back, Brian, and December 11th and give us the results?
I think the answer is yes, but let me check.
Okay.
We'll have to work on the schedule. I've got a presentation that night to Fremont Unified, but we can perhaps do them early and do you late, or do you early and do them late. I've
Sure.
actually done that before, so
Sure.
we can work
We'll
that.
see you on December 11th.
Okay, we'll see you then.